He was born on July 29, 1883, in the town of Predapio in the Romagna region of Italy. His father, Alessandro Mussolini, was a blacksmith and a fervent socialist. His mother, Rosa Maltini, was a devout Catholic and a schoolteacher. Named Benito after the Mexican revolutionary Benito Juarez, the boy who grew up among hammers and hymns would one day forge a new political religion in Italy, one of power, pride, and steel. His name was Benito Amilcare Andrea Mussolini, and he would become the founder of fascism. Education, from first class to final step. Mussolini began his education under the watchful eye of his mother, who taught him to read and write. He attended a religious boarding school, where his defiant nature quickly emerged. He was often violent, undisciplined, and combative. He stabbed a classmate with a penknife, threw inkwells, and frequently challenged teachers. Even as a boy, Mussolini burned with rage and ambition. Despite his rebelliousness, he was intelligent and sharp. He graduated from the normal school in Limpopoli and received a teaching certificate. For a short time, he worked as a schoolteacher in northern Italy. But the classroom could not contain his hunger. He was drawn to political ideas and revolutionary energy. As a young man, he immersed himself in socialist literature. He read Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Georges Sorel. He moved to Switzerland in 1902 to avoid military service and found work as a laborer. During this time, he joined trade unions, agitated for workers' rights, and lived a life of exile and poverty. He attended political meetings, debated theory, and was arrested multiple times for his activism. Mussolini eventually returned to Italy and became an editor for socialist newspapers. He climbed the ranks of the Italian Socialist Party and gained national attention for his fiery writing and uncompromising tone. But it was the Great War that would transform him from a revolutionary socialist into something new and far more dangerous. How he became a dictator. When World War I broke out in 1914, Mussolini at first opposed it. Like most socialists, he saw the war as an imperialist conflict. But within months, his position changed. He began to argue that Italy should join the war. He believed that war would cleanse and renew the nation, creating a new man and a new society. This shift cost him his position at the Socialist Party's newspaper, and he was expelled from the party entirely. Mussolini now stood alone. But he seized this opportunity to forge a new political identity. In 1915, he enlisted in the army and fought on the front lines. He was wounded by a mortar explosion and discharged. The war had radicalized him. Italy, too, had changed. When the war ended in 1918, the country was exhausted, broken, and divided. Veterans returned home to find no jobs, no honor, and no purpose. The economy was in ruins. Socialists, anarchists, and nationalists fought in the streets. The liberal government seemed paralyzed. Into this chaos stepped Mussolini. In 1919, he founded the Fasci di Combattimento, groups of ex-soldiers and nationalists united by rage, militarism, and a desire for national rebirth. Their symbol was the fasces, a bundle of rods tied around an axe, borrowed from ancient Rome. Their slogan was order through strength. Mussolini's fascists wore black shirts and beat opponents in the streets. They broke up union meetings, set fire to socialist headquarters, and used violence as a political tool. Landowners, industrialists, and the middle class began to support them, fearful of a Bolshevik-style revolution. In 1921, Mussolini entered the Italian parliament. That same year, he formally founded the National Fascist Party. His rise was swift. In October 1922, as Italy teetered on the edge of collapse, Mussolini organized the March on Rome. Thousands of black shirts converged on the capital, demanding power. King Victor Emmanuel III refused to declare martial law. Instead, he invited Mussolini to form a government. At the age of 39, Mussolini became Prime Minister of Italy. The revolution had succeeded not with a shot, but with a parade. After acquiring dictatorship, rule over army and country. At first, Mussolini ruled within the existing political system. He kept up appearances of democracy. But behind the scenes, he was dismantling it. He banned opposition parties, censored the press, and filled the parliament with loyalists. In 1925, he declared himself Il Duce, the leader, and established a one-party dictatorship. He created a state built on spectacle and fear. His face appeared on posters, coins, and monuments. Children chanted his name in school. His speeches were broadcast in factories and farms. Italy was to be reborn through unity, strength, and loyalty to one man. Mussolini reshaped the military, expanding the armed forces and glorifying war. He introduced corporatism, where labor and industry were organized into state-controlled syndicates. The regime crushed labor unions and centralized the economy under fascist control. He launched massive public works projects, roads, bridges, and buildings aimed at modernizing Italy and displaying fascist grandeur. The most famous was the draining of the Pontine Marshes, a centuries-old swampland transformed into farmland. But beneath the grand promises lay repression. Political opponents were arrested, exiled, or murdered. The OVRA, Mussolini's secret police, monitored every whisper. Dissent was silenced. Italy became a stage, and Mussolini the sole actor. He sought to resurrect the Roman Empire. In 1935, he invaded Ethiopia, using poison gas and brutal tactics to crush resistance. The world condemned him, but inside Italy, he was celebrated. For a time, he seemed invincible. In 1936, he formed an alliance with Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany. At first, Mussolini distrusted Hitler and saw him as reckless, but as Germany grew more powerful, Mussolini drew closer. The two leaders formed the Axis powers, uniting fascism and Nazism in a pact that would lead to catastrophe. In 1940, Italy entered World War II on the side of Germany. Mussolini dreamed of conquest. He sent troops to North Africa, Greece, and the Balkans. But Italian forces were poorly equipped, poorly led, and unprepared. Campaigns failed. Defeats mounted. His empire collapsed as quickly as it rose. The Italian people turned against him. The Allies invaded Sicily in 1943, and Mussolini's own Grand Council voted to remove him. He was arrested on orders of the king. But Hitler intervened. German commandos rescued Mussolini from captivity and set him up as the puppet leader of the Italian Social Republic in northern Italy. By then, he was a shadow of the man he once was. His control was limited. His words rang hollow. He ruled from the barrel of German guns. As the war neared its end, Mussolini attempted to flee to Switzerland with his mistress, Claretta Petixi. He was captured by Italian partisans near Lake Como. On April 28, 1945, he was executed by firing squad. List of bad deeds. Established a fascist dictatorship that suppressed all opposition and civil liberties. Used violence, propaganda, and secret police to control the population. Formed an alliance with Nazi Germany and contributed to the outbreak of World War II. Invaded Ethiopia with chemical weapons, killing tens of thousands of civilians. Passed racial laws in 1938 that discriminated against Jews, stripping them of rights and dignity. Entered a disastrous war that led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Italians. Deceived the public with promises of empire while destroying Italy's economy and sovereignty. Created a cult of personality that elevated one man above law, reason, and morality. List of good deeds. Modernized Italian infrastructure with public works projects and new transportation networks. Drained and cultivated the Pontine marshes, creating farmland, and reducing malaria. Promoted industrial growth and technological development in the early years of his rule. Unified and stabilized Italy after years of political chaos and post-war unrest. These achievements, however, were rooted in authoritarianism and ultimately overshadowed by war, suffering, and dictatorship. Death date and cause. Benito Mussolini died on April 28, 1945. He was executed by Italian partisans as he attempted to flee the country disguised as a German soldier. He was shot alongside his mistress, Claretta Pedixi, near the village of Dongo. Their bodies were taken to Milan and hung upside down in a public square, a grim symbol of the dictator's fall from power and the people's rage. Where buried. After his execution, Mussolini's body was buried in an unmarked grave to prevent it from becoming a shrine. In 1957, his remains were returned to his birthplace, Predapio, where they now lie in the family crypt. The tomb has become a site of controversy and pilgrimage, drawing fascist sympathizers and sparking debates about memory, history, and legacy. Underscore 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 on. Shall I now proceed to the biography of Idi Amin? Here is the complete extended biography of Idi Amin, written in pure English, following your exact formatting preferences, no abbreviations. No section numbers or dividers. Begins from education onward. Dramatic, neutral tone with verified facts. At least 1,300 words. Underscore 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 on. He was born around 1925 in the town of Koboko, in northwestern Uganda, near the borders of Sudan and the Congo. His exact birth date remains uncertain, like much of his early life, which was cloaked in myth and contradiction. His mother, Asaat, was a herbalist and traditional healer. His father, Andreas Niabire, was a member of the Kakwe ethnic group, a small Muslim community in a predominantly Christian nation. His father abandoned the family early, and Idi Amin was raised mostly by his mother. From the very beginning, he was exposed to hardship, superstition, and the quiet but deep fractures of colonial Africa. Education, from first class to final step. Idi Amin received little formal education. He attended an Islamic school in Bombo, near Kampala, where he learned to read the Quran and some basic Arabic. However, he never progressed beyond the 4th grade. He struggled with literacy and academic study and often preferred physical activity over classroom discipline. With few prospects and no access to higher education, Amin joined the British colonial army, known as the King's African Rifles, in 1946. He began as a cook, but his size, strength, and natural military instincts were quickly noticed by British officers. Though poorly educated, he was clever, observant, and eager to please those in command. The army became his real school, a place where he learned discipline, strategy, violence, and power. How he became a dictator. Amin rose rapidly through the ranks of the colonial military. He served with distinction in Kenya during the Mau Mau Rebellion and later in Somalia. His bravery was praised by British commanders, and he became one of the few Africans to reach the rank of lieutenant in a white-dominated officer corps. He was brutal, ambitious, and ruthlessly loyal to those who rewarded him. But he was also unpredictable, prone to sudden violence, and suspected by some of enjoying cruelty. When Uganda gained independence from Britain in 1962, the newly formed National Army absorbed Amin and his fellow African soldiers. He became one of the top commanders under Prime Minister Milton Obote. The two men had a complicated relationship. Obote saw Amin as a useful weapon, but also a potential threat. In the late 1960s, Amin became involved in illegal arms deals and banking fraud, enriching himself and smuggling gold and ivory from the Congo. Obote grew suspicious. When Obote attempted to arrest him in 1971, Amin struck first. While the Prime Minister was away on a diplomatic trip to Singapore, Amin launched a military coup. On January 25, 1971, Idi Amin seized power in Uganda. Soldiers loyal to him took control of government buildings, radio stations, and airports. The people, weary of political corruption and slow reform, at first welcomed him. He promised stability, free elections, and a return to civilian rule. Crowds cheered him in the streets. Western governments, including Britain and Israel, quickly recognized his regime. But the man behind the uniform was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. After acquiring dictatorship, rule over army and country. Once in control, Amin abandoned any pretense of democracy. He suspended parts of the constitution, dissolved parliament, and ruled by decree. He promoted himself to field marshal and named himself head of state, commander-in-chief, and president for life. His official titles grew longer each year. At the height of his arrogance, he declared himself conqueror of the British Empire and claimed to be the uncrowned King of Scotland. Amin filled the government with loyalists, many from his own ethnic group or Muslim background. He rewarded soldiers with land, women, and power. Those who opposed him were tortured, executed, or simply disappeared. The army became his personal enforcer. He surrounded himself with secret police, bodyguards, and a rotating cast of advisors, many of whom feared him more than they obeyed him. In 1972, Amin made one of his most infamous decisions. He ordered the expulsion of approximately 60,000 Asians, most of them Indian and Pakistani families who had lived in Uganda for generations. Many of them were citizens, business owners, and professionals. Amin claimed they were exploiting Africans and undermining the economy. In truth, he wanted to seize their assets and redistribute their wealth to his supporters. The expulsion was brutal and chaotic. Families were given 90 days to leave the country. Businesses were confiscated overnight. Banks were looted. The economy, once one of the strongest in East Africa, began to collapse. Factories shut down. Food production dropped. Corruption became rampant. Amin continued to rule through fear. Thousands of people were arrested without charge. Torture chambers were established in police barracks and army camps. Victims were beaten, electrocuted, and mutilated. Many were thrown into the Nile River. The killings were random, ethnic, and political. Some were targeted for being from the wrong tribe. Others simply spoke the wrong word at the wrong time. Human rights organizations estimate that between 300,000 and 500,000 Ugandans were murdered during his rule. Amin lived lavishly amid the terror. He had a fleet of luxury cars, multiple wives, and dozens of children. He threw extravagant parties, dressed in elaborate military uniforms, and staged absurd ceremonies. He once had an archbishop killed and left his mutilated body on the street as a warning. His palace grounds included a torture chamber disguised as a swimming pool. His foreign policy was erratic. He cut ties with Britain and Israel, then embraced Libya, the Soviet Union, and the Palestine Liberation Organization. He praised Adolf Hitler and blamed Jews for the world's problems. He invaded neighboring Tanzania in 1978, claiming disputed territory. But the Tanzanian army, along with Ugandan exiles, launched a counterattack. Amin's forces were defeated. Kampala fell in April 1979. Idi Amin fled the country, leaving behind chaos and corpses. He escaped first to Libya, then Saudi Arabia, where he was granted asylum on the condition that he would never engage in politics again. He lived in a luxurious villa in Jeddah, surrounded by servants, wives, and children. He never apologized. He never faced trial. List of bad deeds. Expelled 60,000 Asians from Uganda, leading to economic collapse and national instability. Ordered the murder of between 300,000 and 500,000 people through ethnic purges, political assassinations, and military terror. Used torture chambers and mass executions to eliminate dissent and instill fear. Destroyed Uganda's economy by nationalizing industries and handing them to incompetent loyalists. Plundered national resources for personal wealth and allowed widespread corruption in every government sector. Arrested and executed religious leaders, including the Anglican Archbishop John Nilewum. Fostered tribalism and ethnic violence, pitting groups against each other to secure his own power. Engaged in a senseless war with Tanzania, which led to his downfall and widespread devastation. List of good deeds. Opposed colonial legacies and promoted African pride, declaring an independent African identity. Encouraged local ownership of businesses and land, though implemented with catastrophic consequences. Offered symbolic solidarity with other African and Muslim nations, seeking to elevate Uganda's profile. Established military hospitals and encouraged physical fitness and sports participation at national levels. Any positive actions taken by Amin were ultimately overshadowed by the immense suffering, violence, and instability he caused. Death date and cause. Idi Amin died on August 16, 2003, in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. He had been in a coma for weeks after suffering kidney failure. His death came quietly, far from the land he once ruled with an iron fist. The Ugandan government declined to repatriate his remains. Most of the world responded with silence or restrained relief. Where buried? He was buried in a modest grave in the Ruwais Cemetery in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. There was no public ceremony, no memorial, and no monument. He died as he had lived in exile, shielded by power, untouched by justice, and followed only by the ghosts of those he left behind.